Hey, it's Aaron again. This time I'm going to answer a question from Logan. Logan asked a question that is similar to what I was asked a few years ago. Back in 2019, I did a video on why manufacturers are not making sedans anymore, why they're moving away from sedans, and why there are fewer and fewer on the market. Logan asked a similar question. He wants to know why sedans are not selling here. So that's a little more specific than the last one. The last time I was covering more of the um, the not the market itself as much as I was the where the sedans were going. So let's look at the market itself. Let's look at why sedans don't sell well in the U.S. They've been sales-wise, they've been dipping for a very long time. Recently, that dip has evened out a little more, so we probably have found the even point. The same thing that minivans did a few years ago. They sales plummeted, and then they kind of found that plateau point and stayed there. So same thing here. Uh, Really, what's happened is culturally we are not as interested in cars anymore. Back in the day, cars were the thing because really that was all there was. You had a car or you had a pickup truck. And then eventually you had a pickup truck that had been turned into a utility vehicle, became an SUV. Those were really the only choices on the market. The cars at the time were being stretched and expanded. They were turning into station wagons, they were turning into vans, they were turning into other things, but essentially they were always a car. So what happened was somewhere in the 80s and the 90s, we started to see a shift where we went away from cars and more towards SUVs, and then eventually crossovers were introduced. Crossovers were car-based SUVs, so they were a vehicle that was designed the same way a car is, with the same kind of chassis. It handled very similarly, felt a lot the same, and but had the space and the size and the high ride height of an SUV. So those started to take over, and very quickly, the minivans were first. They started encroaching into the minivan market first because most of the original crossovers were fairly large. They were Dodge Durangos. They were who else had one? There were the Hyundais and Toyotas that we started to see. The smallest of those was the RAV4 back in the day. Was the first of that class. Lots of those were being introduced in the 90s. But at that time, you still had like the Toyota 4Runner and the Nissan Pathfinder. Those were still truck-based SUVs. They were still little trucks built high off the ground. Eventually, the Pathfinder morphed in about 3 generations ago, I want to say. It became a crossover, so it became a car-based SUV instead. Much more interior space and a lot of other advantages to doing that. So a unibody vehicle, car-based vehicle, has a much bigger interior than a body on a frame or truck-based vehicle. So as SUVs began to proliferate, they began to open up and enter more and more markets. As they opened and got into those markets, they went from just being midsize and compact to becoming full-size, to becoming not quite midsize, luxury, although they started hitting all of the markets. As they did that, car sales started to drop because those are where cars had been dominating. So if you look at the market today, the dominant sedan market is luxury, not standard sedans, with one exception, and that is the Toyota Camry. The Toyota Camry is kind of the never-ending, never going to go away midsize car, and it just seems to never die. It holds onto its market pretty well. Now it has been seeing losses, and it has been seeing renewed competition because what's happening now is we're seeing sedans, the ones that are left on the market. So most of the Detroit sedans are gone. The last one left, really, there's two. There is the Dodge Charger, which is their four-door muscle car, and there is the Chrysler 300. Other than that, big size sedans are pretty much gone outside of European imports. But we are seeing more and more all-wheel drive being added to sedans, which is making them more competitive with crossovers, because one of the selling points or one of the attractions of a crossover for us is that it feels, at least, looks and feels all-weather friendly. And if you look at sales numbers, far more all-wheel drives are sold than just front-wheel or rear-wheel drives. So we're seeing more and more of that sort of thing, and that is boosting sedan sales. Other than that, though, sedans just are no longer popular. They're kind of dying away. We never really had a culture where a sedan was the car. In Europe, they had that. They had the culture where sedan was a big deal. They were always considered luxurious and fine and great drives and utilitarian. Here, not so much. Sedans were kind of what you bought because you couldn't afford the other thing. Or they were what you bought because that was what fit, but it was a family fit, right? So it was like the minivan. So it culturally became the snooze car. It's not interesting. With a handful of exceptions, and again, those are mostly muscle cars and luxury cars. So that is the real reason sedans have kind of been dying off. It's because culturally here, we just are not as interested in them. We didn't have the same sort of background that they had that was created or happened in Europe and other countries, Asia as well. Asia is really big on sedans. It hasn't been we didn't have the same thing here. So it just never happened. Because of that, sedans, even though they sold really, really well for a very long time, they were always on kind of shaky ground. And once there was a bigger, better replacement, Americans jumped on it. Bigger is always better here. That's how we roll. So it's kind of a good pun. Anyway, that's what I got. Hopefully this helps. And I hope that Logan, I hope you got something out of this, because I know I forgot to send you an email. I penned said email and it set in my draft folder and I just noticed it. Very sorry about that. But hopefully this video helps and explains some of what's going on. If you have a question that you want asked, or if you want me to add more clarification to this particular question or one like it, you can always hit the comments and ask. Just right there, I read the comments. I reply to a lot of them. You can know that. Also, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, etc. I ask when you do find me there, please try to instant message or DM me, because I may or may not see a comment or a post that I'm tagged in, because there are a lot of those. So, all right. That's what I got. This has been Aaron. Talk to you again soon.